Suzy Wrong, Joy Drive's film, TV and theatre reviewer.
Suzy Wrong, welcome back.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So good to be with you on the second week of the Mardi Gras Film Festival.
Yes, and of course, if you want to see it, it is queerscreen.org.au. We're talking about Sediments today, Suzy. Do you want to tell us about it?
SEDIMENTOS, or SEDIMENTS, is a Spanish documentary film that follows 6 trans women on a road trip traveling into the countryside. The women range in age from Zoomers to Boomers, and most of them are strangers with one another. Gradually, as time passes and as the drinks flow, they reveal their deeper selves, and in the process of getting to know each other, we, the viewers, are gifted the extraordinary opportunity of learning about the plurality of trans identities. In political movements, people are reduced to simple archetypes, but all queer people know that the truth of who we are is always much more complex than how we have to present ourselves to those on the outside. In Sediments, we are surprised to see that not all trans people can get along, that not all trans people can connect quickly and easily in spite of the shared experiences we have had as an oppressed minority. Perhaps the most memorable personalities in the documentary are Yolanda and Christina, the oldest women of the group. Yolanda is extremely worldly, having lived all her adult life as an out trans person, but Christina is only now transitioning after spending an entire lifetime enjoying the perks of being perceived as a privileged white man. She is extremely conservative, and although quite unlikable, Christina brings incredible drama and conflict to the film. Sediments is beautifully shot. It often looks nothing like a documentary, but the pure authenticity of what it presents is simply irrefutable. I love the film. I think it's an important and seminal work for our queer culture, coming at an absolutely unique time when the torturous past and bright future of trans people are able to collide. I strongly recommend it to all our listeners. Sediments is streaming as part of the Mardi Gras Film Festival until the 3rd of March. Go to queerscreen.org.au ASAP to check it out, no matter where you are in Australia. It's a must-see, don't you think, Em and Warren?
Suzy, okay, first things first, I've got to admit, when I started watching this film, I didn't know it was a documentary. And so it took me a while to, well, even actually, to be honest, I Googled it after I watched it to be like, did I just, because all of the stories were obviously so real. I thought that potentially they had just been telling their own stories because, as you said, it was shot so nicely. I was like, I'm confused whether this is a documentary or not. But it was really, really, I think, as you said, beautifully shot. I thought the stories were really obviously organically told because they were real, which there you go. That's exactly right. And I thought that it was really lovely that each personal journey was at a completely different point, but there were moments where they did relate and there were moments where they did sort of, have these important discussions and they had these points of difference and they were able to talk it out and you kind of got to see all of their perspectives, which I found really awesome as well. I found the ego storyline and them constantly talking about this egotism or being egotistical really interesting because Christina, who was the one who they were saying was being egotistical.
An egomaniac.
Yeah, an egomaniac, that's it. Was actually, but I'm saying that I'm different from you because I'm lesser than you. And they were saying, but that's still saying that your story is different than ours, and that's not fair. And I thought it was a really interesting and enlightening thing that happened throughout the film, and that conversation and that word kept coming back. And
yeah, they were trying to explain to her that they're not saying that she's selfish. They're not saying that she's narcissistic. She's just too caught up in her own story and not able to reach out and listen to what other people are doing.
And maybe she needs to process that by talking about it. She feels that need.
Yeah, but I think a lot of trans people, especially in the early stages of transition, you do become such an egomaniac. I think a lot of it is about fear as well, sort of coming out. Because especially when someone that's, hadn't come out for, it looks like 50 years to me, there is a lot of fear. And then when you're coming out, you're just caught up in your own process. It's really hard, and I think all trans people have experienced that where, you can't talk about anything but your transition, and it's really boring for other people.
You know what I really loved about it? I love that the women are telling their stories, and some of the stories I found quite confronting to hear, but what I really liked is they're really comfortable in telling them. They weren't uncomfortable in telling their stories. And I know we've got a long way to go, Suzy, but how encouraging to hear their stories being told in a safe environment. I really enjoyed that part of it. I got a bit confused at the beginning. I thought, it's a documentary. I didn't realise. And even that was after my initial confusion of thinking, it's all in Spanish, and I couldn't get the subtitles. And I was like, well, maybe I just keep watching it and they'll start talking and then I'll understand it. And then I realised on my device you have to press a button to get the subtitles. So, I missed probably the first 2 minutes of it. But Suzy, did you identify with their stories, or do you find there's some common theme amongst them, even though, they are quite different?
I think I was focused on, like I said, the plurality of it, and sort of appreciating how everyone came from a different place. Obviously, there were so many different age groups, and that is a really important part of the story, like some of them look like they were in their 20s, and some of them look like they were in their 60s, and everywhere in between. And I was trying to put myself outside a bit more than I usually do, and not sort of get caught up in my egomania and listen to how they do it. But I agree with you. It's so good to see, like I said, it's such an important time when not only do you get the past, you get the future at the same time, because I don't think you can get that past anymore, because I think in 10 years' time that history would have died off, because people do die off. And then, but at this moment, we still get that really harrowing stories, about especially Yolanda's stories about her survival with cancer and with sex work and a lot of sort of physical torment. And that stuff was so valuable to see. I think... Obviously, I do feel deep down watching films like that makes me feel less lonely. I don't think it is not a stage thing that they put 6 strangers together, because we don't hang out in groups of trans people. Just because you're trans doesn't mean that you know all the trans people in your area. It kind of doesn't really work like that. I think our numbers are so small.
They don't necessarily all get along. I mean, so I know it's the same with amongst gay men. Just because we're gay, we don't all necessarily get along. We try to, but sometimes we don't.
Yeah, and I think the numbers of trans women are so tiny, that the percentage is so small. It's so hard to find trans people near you and then be able to get along. It's hard. So it was good to see how what we are like when we're in a group, whether we are friends or not, and it was just so good to feel like, that's what you're like as a group. And like I was saying, it sort of takes away that loneliness a little bit. Like, I'm not really a lonely person. I have a lot of good friends, but I don't have really close trans friends. So that was a nice sort of way into that fantasy of, what is it like? What is it going to be like if I did have trans people that I hung out with all the time?
We're chatting with Suzy Rong about Sentiments, which is part of the Mardi Gras Film Festival. I just realised as you were talking, Suzy, why it's called Sentiments. Because like
Sediments.
Because it's sentimental. Sediments, rather. It's because the layered rocks one of the scenes in the film
quarry.
is they go and see these layered rocks. And when you were just explaining how you see a bunch of trans people at different stages of their life, they create that those layers.
Yeah, and it's so good to see these really like woke 20-something-year-olds that they have so... It feels like they have understood themselves so early and been through the transition so early. They have so like little baggage with them in comparison with someone like Christina, who's hanging on to so much baggage, like 5-6 decades of really difficult stuff and trying to come out of it. And then I love seeing that juxtaposition and then through that seeing the optimism of what it probably will be like for future trans generations, but you can never be too sure.
And the other thing that I really loved about it, Em and Suzy too, and just building on what you've just said, is they go on outings to the Quarry, for example, or the restaurant, and they go to the Quarry, and they're asking the same questions that I would ask, like, hang on, I find this really disastrous and horrible because it's it's not natural, and you've got those interactions going on between them, or the restaurant where they're flirting with the waiter, and I thought, wow, this is so good. We have the contrast of some really challenging and horrific stories, but also we've got the reality of what it's like now. And I thought that was, I don't know. I kind of therapeutic in a way. You know what I mean?
It was therapeutic, yeah. There's some very light stuff juxtaposing with some very heavy things, and it just feels like real life. And it feels like, even though it's not a really long film, it's probably like 1.5 hours, but it felt like it covered so much ground, and in such a gentle way. It wasn't heavy-handed, but they were able to sort of get you a glimpse of so much through that time.
Suzy, we often talk about queer films and films with, elements of community that are often bullied or mistreated. And in this film, we hear stories of some really sort of horrendous and awful moments, but there's also, as you were saying, the lightness with that shade as well. And I really enjoyed the moment with the grandma and the mum when they were going through the picture books, the photo albums, and just the grandma's like honesty, but also kind of knowing, and just that it sounded like they had kind of accepted their grandchild and child straight away, which was really lovely, and a nice. Again, like a nice moment in that real world.
And the ease with which they express that, it wasn't too hard. The way that we, for decades, the last few decades of film history, whenever we came to stories like that, it was always so difficult, so painful, especially for the older people. But this old granny, took it in her stride, and, she understood it as much as she could. And I appreciated that. I appreciated being able to see that side of human life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think for me, I took out of it, you recognise that some traumatic feelings are from, they're from a previous point in time, and whilst they're still there, things are different now. And I think the thing I took from it is they brought themselves, a sense of kindness to themselves and what have you, and a bit of clarity about, well, this is what's happened and this is where we are now. And that kindness sort of almost, I don't know, it made them a little bit more comfortable in listening to each other's stories. I thought that was really brilliant.
Yeah, the evolution is so important in this film, how we've traveled through the generations, from the stories about back in the day where they had to walk around with razor blades in their mouths to protect themselves.
Wild.
I know. Some amazing stories. We are talking about Sediments, which is part of the Mardi Gras Film Festival. You can view it, as Suzy said, anywhere in Australia at queerscreen.org.au. Suzy, what are we watching next week? Are we still doing some more Mardi Gras Film Festival movies?
Next week, we're looking at our third and final Mardi Gras film before the festival closes 3rd of March. The title is Coming to You. It is an emotional documentary about mothers in the South Korean arm of the P-Flag organization. There will be tears, my darlings.
Oh,
coming to
am I ready, Suzy? I don't know.
You kind of watch it with your mum.
Now, Suzy, we are coming to you because we will be at Mardi Gras this year, so hopefully we'll be able to see you.
Yeah, definitely come and meet up in real life. I haven't met Em at all.
I know, Suzy. I'm so excited. We must.
We will do something.
Yes, a real life catch-up.
Thank you so much, Suzy. A pleasure as always.
Thank you. See you next Tuesday.